The precious bowl game that has eluded Husker fans for almost a decade is finally here. Under 36 hours from now, the Huskers will take on Boston College in the Pinstripe Bowl inside Yankee Stadium. While Nebraska's roster seems to have suffered a lot more casualties than BC, they have had some turnover themselves. Their quarterback, who took the most snaps this season, has notably left for Florida State in the portal. Gary, is there just too much up in the air as far as coaches and players leaving to accurately predict this game? Or can you point to anything that leads you to think you might know what's going to happen?
Yes and no. Like, yes, I feel that there's too much changeover. I don't know how much emphasis is going to be put on winning the game. Obviously, both teams are going to try to win the game. I don't know how all out you're going or how much you're trying to figure out what you got or to kind of set the table going into the next year. I feel like a lot of the value in these bowl games, if you're not in the college playoff, is all the extra practices you get, especially once you know a significant amount or a little bit of whatever it is of your roster is going to be leaving and you know what you have going forward. You kind of get a jump on practices and working in units and things like that before the off season goes and you come back and start doing the conditionings and the camps and things like that. I think we clearly have the more significant people missing. I think Dowdell's going to be a big one. I feel like Emmett was outperforming him towards the end of the season, basically when Holgerson came in. But nowadays, just being one back heavy is so rare. A smaller guy like that, I don't know. I hear, obviously Ramir's back and they're going to want to get him as many reps as they can with it being his last game. We keep hearing Quentin Ives impresses, but I feel like we've been hearing that since Quentin Ives got here and we have yet to see him play any significance in a game. But I'm curious to see what the offense looks like with this much more time with Holgerson. There's not significant losses outside of Dowdle, I don't think. I know Isaiah Nayer's not going to play because he's getting ready for the NFL, and I don't think he even went with the team or whatever that whole deal was. But Ja'Cory Barney, Lennon Meyer, because Borkich is gone, Fedoni, Banks, Lloyd, you still got a good amount of your passing game there. I'm curious to see how that goes. And I'm not going to do a ton of judging other than scheme on what the defense looks like, even though a lot of the guys will still be there. I don't know how much the big, Hutt and Ty Robinson are going to play with it being, well, I don't know if they're both. I know Ty Robinson's playing in the Senior Bowl and they're both, trying to get ready for the draft and all that stuff. So, I mean, it's just, to me, it's a little more than an exhibition game. And I'm just going to be looking at more of a standpoint of what does the offense look like? Does it seem to be any more flow or rhythm to it with an extra month of working under Holgerson? And what's Butler doing schematic wise, especially in that drove me crazy the whole time Tony White was here. And I really like Tony White and his defense, but that mid-range quick pass game that just ate Nebraska alive and let teams march down the field. I want to see if that sets up to look any different. And just kind of if the bluffs are the same. I know Rules talked about he wants to keep the same base defense. I don't know if he means specifically the 3-3-5 or if he means like personnel wise and maybe lining up difference. Maybe it looks like a 4-3, but it's that type of a personnel where you have the extra, more like a nickel and you go more of a traditional type of a nickel instead of the rover or whatever you want to call the Gifford position. But it doesn't mean anything if you win this game. I don't feel like. I mean, I know. I'm not going to be upset. I won't act like I do when we're losing to Iowa or I guess we beat Wisconsin, but UCLA, USC, those games down the stretch, like those are way more significant games. I'm curious to see what kind of a sneak preview of what the full-fledged Holgerson offense is going to look like. Obviously, there'll be more to that, new players next year, but also if there's much variance at all with Butler being the guy calling the plays on defense as well. When we were looking at who Boston College had transferring out, a ton of 3 stars, like the majority of the roster is 3 stars. And Nebraska's kind of been that team for a while. Now we've got 1 or 2 5 stars, depending on how you look at it, and a handful of 4s. But I'm past Nebraska's a better program and we have better athletes, so this should be a win. Like they just don't play like it, especially not on a consistent basis, especially in a basically meaningless game. So I'm not confident in like, oh, Nebraska go in there and beat them regardless of losing these guys or whatever they've done. Like I won't be surprised at all if either team wins. I felt like that, to be fair though. I felt like that with every one of these bowl games outside of the playoff games, because I just feel like they're not taken with the same seriousness. You lose one game in the regular season. I mean, look at Alabama. If they lost one less game, they're in the playoff for sure. They were trying to figure out a way to get them with 3 losses. So I mean, every loss win-loss is significant in the regular season. Obviously, if you're in the playoff, you're trying to play for a title, but these games are just I'm not saying the teams don't care. I think they're both going to actually try to win, but they just, for me, there's no significance. And I think that's no matter how hard you try to coach the players, that's the reality in their mind is like basically an exhibition game. We've been on a week-long vacation in New York City, going to basketball games in Central Park and doing all this other shit. So that's just kind of my stance on it.
I'm not super confident that the Huskers are going to win this game, mainly because they've got their defensive line basically fully intact, and they really get after the quarterback, and that's something that we always struggle with stopping. So if it's their strength, that kind of scares me, because I do expect us to be passing the ball quite a bit, probably out of necessity. But I have to disagree with you a little bit about it not mattering. I think it matters in an unconventional way. It's not like, oh, yay, we beat a solid Big Ten team. That means that we belong in the Big Ten. But it's more of not having a negative taste in your mouth after this season. Like, we all expected to get to a bowl game, but even in achieving that, I don't feel like we have a good taste in our mouth right now. It's on the sour side. And winning the bowl game through the adversity of, oh my gosh, we lost all these people, could make us as fans feel like, hey, the guys that are still here can get it done. And not only did we get to a bowl game, we won it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. And I actually agree with a lot of what you're saying. I'm not really trying to emphasize that the game's not important. I'm saying the games that are important, take Indiana, for example. They came out against Indiana and looked like they had no business playing football, let alone against a Big Ten team, let alone a high-ranked Big Ten team. So, I mean, you can put emphasis on winning games, and if people are just not on fire, you know what I mean, and like super dialed in and focused, you can go through all the progressions and the motions and watch the film and do all the practice, scripted plays and do all that shit. But if you're not going 1,000 miles an hour, 100% with your hair on fire, you're going to get a different result than if you're just going through the motions. And maybe going through the motions is the wrong way to word it. I just don't think that there's going to be this really strong necessity or like we have to win this game. You know what I mean? I don't think the players are going to play with that. I think the coaches are going to try and coach them that way. But I also wouldn't be surprised if you see the coaches, their defensive end's a stud, right? And like you're saying, we have trouble protecting Raiola. Now, I don't think you do it to the point to get Raiola hurt, but this is a game that doesn't matter statistically, record-wise, nothing. You know you're going to have a lot of overturn on that offensive line next year. Rotate some guys that you think are going to play and see how they fare in an actual live college football game against a stud defensive end like that, or like you said, a fully intact that's played together all year defensive line. Or I'm using that as an example. You could do that all over the field. I don't know if you're going to see that, or if you're going to see Rule really be like, okay, to your point, we got to stamp this season solid and go out with a win a bowl game, get hype, get the program, the fan base, the players that are coming back, all this, a lot to be excited for, and end on a high note and have this good momentum going into the offseason. Or if he's going to look at it as, I'm not getting Raiola hurt. I'm not going to risk getting Emmett Johnson hurt. I'm not going to risk Nash and Ty getting hurt or banged up before the NFL draft or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, to me, there's just two drastically different sides you could approach this game with. But I think it's going to be very, very difficult to sell these players on like, this is a must win. I want everybody on their P's and Q's. I want you dialed in like you were in the first half against Colorado. That natural drive and desire, I don't think is there like it is when Colorado smacked you in the teeth last year, and now they're coming in talking shit. And it's like, you know what I mean? You got a lot more will and desire built up, aggression and everything else than you're hanging out vacationing for a week in New York. I know they're practicing stuff, but I'm just saying the feel and the environment, the setup, the lead up to the game, build up and all that is just different. So
it's going to take one hell of a Matt Rule pep talk in the
car
locker room
sales speech
to get him to come out and play that hard. Tell us what you guys think in the comments. Who wins this game? We'll see you guys for the live stream. Till then, go Big Red.